Well, thank you all for your generosity. And to introduce the man who has proved miracles are possible when fueled by passion, dignity, and love, please welcome Lami Glenn.
Good evening. That's right. It's an honor to be here tonight, introducing a man that means so much to every single person that walks through the doors of Homeboy Industries, including myself. I spent 9 years in prison and got out 4 years ago this month. Not to mention being shot several times before going to prison. When I paroled, I never heard of Homeboy Industries. The first time I went to Homeboy Industries, I went with one of my OGs from my neighborhood. They were doing clothing distribution. And I looked around and I was in awe. Everybody there greeted you was a gang member. So for me, I met one of the leaders at Homeboy Industries, Hector Verdugo, and I told him my story. And I eventually was placed on a waiting list to be a part of the training, 18-month training program. Shout out to Big Holmes. So as a trainee, I remember working one day when Father Greg passed me and said, "Hey kiddo, how you doing? Good morning." I thought it was cool that he said hello to me. He treated me like someone who mattered, even though we had never met before. Today, 4 years after that first meeting, I'm a college student, majoring in psychology. That's right. Give it up. Give it up. Give it up. Give it up. Today, I'm a college student majoring in psychology and sociology at Los Angeles City College, scheduled to graduate this June. I'm also a proud father of a 2-year-old son named after me, who was Lami Jr. That's right. I'm also presently a case manager at Homeboy Industries. That's right. Very important job. Great news, just as recently as yesterday morning, I received an email, 1 a.m., basically stating that I've been accepted to the sociology program at Cal State LA. That's right. Yeah. And I haven't been to sleep since. That's right. So this fall semester, I'll be flying with the Cal State LA Golden Eagles. Father G and I recently traveled to High Desert State Prison to talk to a group of inmates on a C&D yard. And in that trip, I had the surprise of my life. I was reunited with my brother David, who I hadn't seen in 14 years. Yeah, give it up, give it up. The hardest part of that trip and that experience was having to leave him there. Today, my ultimate goal is to become a college professor and position myself to become a director at Homeboy Industries. It would be a pleasure for me to be able to tell my homeboys from my neighborhood to come and see me and I can give you a job today. Provide support services, and together we can start the transition of starting a new life. I was raised as a youth in a Christian household, but since being at Homeboys, I've been exposed to a lot of different faiths, including the Jesuit faith. I deeply admire and respect what the Jesuits are doing in the community, so let's give it up for the Jesuits. Father Greg doesn't impose religion on anybody, he lives it. The way he lives is what God should look like. It is at this time, please join me and stand to your feet and welcome a truly great man, the King of Kinship, Father Greg Boyle.
Thank you, Lami, for your spirit and your goodness. My deepest thanks to all the senior staff here and the trainees and all the homies and the homegirls for making this evening happen. Can't happen without you. Thank you to Arlen and the Homegirl Cafe and the bakery. Thank you, Tom Volso, for your tenacious heart and leadership. Pernilla, thank you for your magnificently chairing our board. And to all our board members, thank you. Thanks, Jerry and Fabian, for your friendship over all these many years and for allowing us to honor you both tonight. And mil gracias to Jane and to Lily for making this evening special indeed. You are a class act. So some months ago, I was coming home from the airport with two homies, and there was a homie in the back seat, and he was texting. And he said, "Hey, G, my lady just texted me. What does LMAO stand for?" And I couldn't believe that this geezer was gonna tell him it stands for laugh my ass off. But, you know, in fairness to him, he had been locked up for so long that the whole texting thing was really kind of foreign. He says, you know, I just barely right now found out that LOL didn't stand for lots of love. So he was saying that his 14-year-old teenage daughter had texted him and said, hey, Dad, you know, we won the basketball game. And he texted back, WTF. And she kind of thought to herself, what? And a couple days later, you know, he said, Dad, I passed that math test I was really worried about. And he texted back, WTF. Well, finally, she went to him and she said, hey, Dad, do you know what WTF means? And he goes, of course I do. Why, that's fantastic. I know that sounds like it's a joke, but that's absolutely the truth. And so to all of you, I'm grateful for your presence here tonight. Words fail me, so WTF. You know, years ago in our storefront, one of our storefronts on First Street, I got there to the office at 7:30 in the morning, and I was the only one there, and I was in my office, and the phone rings, and I picked it up, and on the other end of the phone was a very breathless homie who says, gee, are you there? And so I let the question sort of hang in the air, and to make it easier on him, I repeated the question, are you there? And he knew that this wasn't the most astute question that had ever been asked, and so he tried to repair things. He said, well, gee, right now when I said to you, are you there? What I meant was, are you all there? As in, right in the head. And I said to him, good recovery, Doc. Well, we're all here tonight because we long for a good recovery. We all aspire to find strength in the tenderness that reveals how precious we all are. Our good recovery longs to forge new paths of meaning. We want to offer the scapegoating of our times, the courage of our own tenderness. When the world insists on circling the wagons, we want to widen the circle. Just this week, there was a couple that came from somewhere in the Midwest, and it was something of a pilgrimage. They had read some books and saw some YouTube things and watched our thoughts for the day at Homeboy Industries. And then they were given a tour by the magnificent Omar. And then they finally, signed in to see me, and they came into my office, and they were really quite emotional. And the wife in particular was getting quite verklempt, you know, and she said, "This place is the Sistine Chapel." And I think we know what she means. We all have found Homeboy to be sacred, a place that thaws the holy in each one of us. St. Teresa of Avila writes, "And only at the shrine where all are welcome will God sing loud enough to be heard. A shrine where the homies find a power that says no dark fate determines your future, you do. And captured by a noble spirit, you can embark on a journey to fullness, a broad-shouldered resilience, and the wellspring of joy." All of us in this room share in that. Well, I've been at this for a really long time, and I'm always being reminded of that. Not that long ago, I got a text from a homie I knew from back in the days when I used to ride my bike in the projects in the middle of the night. And he texted me and he says, "Hey, G, wish me luck. I'm going in for my first colonoscopy." Made my ass feel old. But what doesn't grow old for us at Homeboy Industries is how love becomes the connective tissue of tenderness. Then a contagion of tenderness takes over, leading to a hope, a longing to stay in this together that never gets old. Homeboy is a place of grace and chaos where joy is always in the wings. Homeboy is not a solution, it's a sign. For it is our very boundlessness that makes boundaries tremble and divisions shiver. Years ago, we had a homie who worked there named Trayvon, much beloved, and somebody who was able to bridge any distance that existed between races and people and enemies. And he was a character. He used to always go up to the second floor and he'd clap his hands, "Stay focused, people." And every head would pop up in the cubicle like a bunch of meerkats, and it was just charming. And whenever I had a hard time understanding exactly what message he was trying to convey to me, he'd say, "Pass the mustard, G, and catch up." So he came with me once along with this guy named Miguel, and we went to San Francisco and gave a bunch of talks. Well, the last talk was at a hotel ballroom, and it was just me, and it was a keynote kind of thing, and a bunch of young people from Teach for America. And I had identified them in the crowd, and afterwards, the two of them were just surrounded by mainly females, were hanging on every word, you know, and I looked over them at some point after some time, and I pointed at my watch. Gotta go. And so they break away, and as we're walking to the car, Trayvon says, I asked him, I said, "Wow, those ladies sure seem to be hanging on every word." And he said, "Let's just say we were reaping the benefits of your talk." But as we moved to our car in the parking lot, Trayvon said, "Wow, that made me feel important right now." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, when you told us it was time, I told them we had to leave, and a young lady said, 'Do you have to go?' And I looked at her and I said, 'Got a flight to catch.'" I've never said that sentence in my whole life. Got a flight to catch. In fact, we're catching the red eye. Well, I explained to him that the red eye is when you fly at night and you arrive at your destination, your eyes are red because you didn't sleep very well. I reminded him that we were leaving at 4 in the afternoon. And he said, damn, I probably shouldn't have said that. So we get in the car and he's in the back seat and he says, all I can say is, that shit made me feel good. Well, a great many of you know that it was about a month later I told the same story at his funeral. And he was gunned down at a family picnic. Too many guns, so much lethal absence of hope, not enough healing. But before Trayvon left us, he found love as his true identity and his deepest dignity. And the rest of us found that death is no match for that. Trayvon had not been properly introduced to himself until he landed in this particular community of kinship, and he found himself whole and anchored in the fullness of his truth. For we are all changed by what we are focused on. Stay focused, people. Homeboy is a sign and an invitation to stand at the margins, to live at the edge of things where opposites meet, where fear meets courage, suffering meets freedom, enemies meet rivals, and something begins, peril and possibility, crisis and opportunity, a gateway to something more spacious. Many years ago, a homie named Youngster, 19 years old, I brought him to Homeboy Silkscreen, which has been around for some 26 years. And I introduced this guy to all his coworkers. Half of them were enemies, and I watched as he shook hands with each one and looked them in the eyes. Firm handshake, enemies greeted. And I thought to myself, wow, this is great. Until he gets to the last guy in the round of workers, a guy named Puppet. And when Puppet and Youngster are in each other's vicinity, they mumble something, they stare at their shoes, they won't shake hands. Well, I know they're enemies because I know what gangs they're from, but he just shook hands with a whole bunch of enemies. I discover later that this is a hatred and resentment that was really quite deep and profound, beyond which neither of them thought they could really get past. So I sensed that much at the moment, and I look at the two of them, I said, hey, you know, if you guys can't hang working with each other, let me know. I got a lot of people who want this job. And they say nothing. Some 6 months later, a Puppet leaves his home and walks to a corner store some distance from his house, and he purchases something. On the way home, for some reason, he decides to take a shortcut, and he dodges into an alley, and because he took this detour, suddenly, unexpectedly, he's surrounded by 10 members of a rival gang, 10 against 1. And they beat him badly, and he falls to the ground. And while he's lying there, they will not stop kicking his head until he's lifeless. Someone finds his body and takes him to White Memorial Hospital, where he's declared effectively brain dead. But it's the policy there to keep him connected to machines for 48 hours so you can get 2 days of a flat read of brain activity. And once it's completely flat, then they can declare him dead. I was giving a talk in St. Louis University. I flew home right away. I've seen a lot of horrible things in my life, but nothing to compare to the sight of this young man with his head swollen many times its size. It was horrifying. You could barely train your eyes on him. So at the end of the 2 days, I anointed his forehead with oil. I said a blessing prayer. We disconnected. And a week later, I buried him. But in the first 24 hours, as I was sitting in my office while Puppet was lying beaten in the hospital, it was about 8:30 at night and the phone rings, and it's Youngster, Puppet's coworker from the silkscreen factory. And he says, "Hey, that's messed up about what happened to Puppet." I said, "Yeah, it is." And then with a certain kind of eagerness, he said, "Is there anything I can do? Can I give him my blood?" And we both fall silent under the weight of it until finally he breaks the silence, choking back his tears, and he says with great deliberation, "He was not my enemy. He was my friend. We worked together." At Homeboy Industries, it's not about loving your enemies. It's about not having them. We aren't a solution. We are a sign to dismantle the lines drawn to separate us. And like the homies, we all discover tenderness as our weapon of choice. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for setting the compass of your hearts. So together in this Sistine Chapel of Homeboy Industries, we can create a world we've never seen before. And only at that shrine where all are welcome will God sing loud enough to be heard. Thank you very much, and see you next year.
That's our show. Thanks to our honorees, our presenters, our performers, but most of all, our thanks to all of you. Your support is what keeps Homeboy Industries strong.
Your commitment changes lives for them, for our city, and for the world. And if you haven't filled out the pledge cards on your table, please fill them out and drop them off at the door. Remember, our friends at the Johnny Carson Foundation will match your donation penny for penny, up to $200,000. Thank you so much for your support. Good night.
Good night.